New Artist Spotlight Podcast.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for this week's New Artist Spotlight podcast. I'm Lisa Haden, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Origin Cross, and welcome back again to the show. We're glad to be back in the seats, and today we have another really dope guest for you guys. Today we're interviewing ZipZapZop. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much to both of you. Appreciate you. Appreciate this podcast and all the work you put into it for the New Artist Spotlight. It's a really great boon to the community. So I'm happy to be here.
Oh, thank
Great to
you.
have you.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so ZipZapZop, also known as Clark of Saturn, Space Trucking Mogul. I'm in Baltimore, Maryland. Just turned 56, and I've been basically making music since I was a little child. You know, I remember there was a piano in my house and a guitar and always playing records when I was growing up. I started writing songs and playing the piano when I was like 5 or 6 years old, and then taught myself guitar and played in all the bands in high school. I grew up in Iowa in a very small town. It was a farmer town. There were 28 students in my class. They graduated high school. So we kind of did everything because it was so small. Like there were 100 some students in the whole high school. So that meant, you know, you were on the jazz band and the concert band and the marching band and the football team and the and the plays and and all the choirs and the swing choir. So it was kind of like everybody had to do everything or there wouldn't be anything, you know. Um, so that was kind of like, you know, that was kind of like my experience. And, you know, we had band and all the different types of band. Eventually, I kind of did self-taught guitar and did some classical guitar lessons. And kind of, I've been in bands more or less since I was in high school. I was in a rock band in college, and then I started doing electronic music after college and kind of fell in love with doing that. And I kind of gave up music. Well, I was in some bands and moved to New York and did a bunch of things in like electronic music and drum and bass and did some touring in Europe and stuff and some records. And then eventually I kind of like put that on the back burner for career and family and like moved to the mountains and kind of gave up on music for a while, I guess you could say, to focus on my career and family and everything. And then during COVID, I was kind of like, you know, I've got some time back on my hands. I just finished up a doctorate and I was like, I've got all this time on my hands and my kids are teenagers now, so they don't need me as much. So I just like dusted off my stuff and started back at making music. And now it's like it's been a really great little journey.
Nice.
Awesome.
So, since you do electronic music, right? How was that transition kind of from when you were starting off years down the line versus now, where so much of production and recording is all electronic, right? How was that transition and progression for you?
Yeah, I love that question. Because when I started like making my own music, I had a project called Electrode Dingus 2026. This was in the 90s. I was fascinated with the year 2026, so I'm expecting great things next year. But I literally made I had a 4-track cassette recorder that I got at a pawn shop. And I made like this tape that was based on using a delay pedal. I had also got at a pawn shop, and I was using a microphone and different instruments in the delay pedal and making loops and then layering them on top of each other with the 4-track cassette recorder. So it was very chaotic and kind of industrial and noisy and so on. And eventually I was like, oh, I should get a sampler, you know. So I started learning these things like, oh, I need to get a sampler. So I got like an Ensoniq ASR10 sampler, and then eventually other things like a DB4 effects unit and mixing board and stuff. And kind of it was all very hardware oriented and around big things that I would have to lug up the stairs every time I would take out for a gig or something and throw out my back or whatever, you know. Even when we went on tour with my buddy Rob in Europe in 1999, we had these big SKB rack mount flight cases that we brought, like 2 of them each. It was like huge amount of stuff. And then nowadays, the transition was over to using a laptop and Ableton Live and maybe a MIDI keyboard. And I still have some outboard gear as well, but it is certainly nice to just be able to travel with like some good headphones and a laptop and continue working no matter where I am. And that's definitely something I couldn't do in those first few phases.
Yeah.
Mhm. It's amazing how many people have mentioned COVID as like a sort of turning point in their music, either concentrating on their music or getting back into it. It's amazing the impact that COVID had on the music people in that we've spoken to. And it's really interesting to hear how things have changed over time because I never did any recording sort of like that when I was younger. But I remember tapes and things like that. So I can't imagine what it was like to have to lug all of that sort of stuff around with you.
Absolutely. And my first experience recording was when I was in a band in college called The Priorities, and we rented out a studio. It was luckily pretty low cost. This was in Iowa. It was in a small town. But, we rent out the studio and the engineer, and we did the mix down, and we created our own cassettes. And that was the thing. But, back then it was like you could send cassettes out to radio stations or to wherever, you had no idea if they were being opened or listened to or just like thrown away right away or anything, which is so different now because it's like, you can send a private link to something on SoundCloud and you at least have an idea of like if people are actually listening or not to the things that you're promoting or sharing, which is kind of nice, I think, as opposed to the way it used to be with all the physical media. And certainly there's a lot of nostalgia. I still love vinyl. I've got a lot of vinyl still in my collection. And I've heard people talking about we need to go back to CDs, although I don't think I'd go that far. But they sound great, but they're so like they get scratched so easily and stuff, and then once it's like they're useless.
Mhm. No, I agree. I wouldn't go back to CDs. I've got far too many of them that don't actually work anymore because they've got scratched on, so they just jump halfway through a song or something. So
Mhm.
no, no more CDs for me.
Right.
But your history is really fascinating because you've sort of taught yourself an awful lot, and now you're at the point where you've got a couple of different productions. So could you tell us about sort of where you are now in terms of the production companies and stuff?
Yeah, so basically when I started, during COVID, I was making a remix for a friend of mine out in Colorado. And so I'd been using Ableton Live as my primary digital audio workstation since the early 2000s, right when it first came out. And I've always loved Ableton Live. For me, it's a wonderful place to be able to create and to formulate ideas and to capture things. And then it's a full-fledged studio. You can do everything all the way down to mixing and mastering. So that's been really great. And then, yeah, along the way, I kind of picked up a couple of other projects. So I started ZipZapZop, actually. I was looking for a name for the project, and I knew I needed some kind of a new name for the project. And ZipZapZop was actually something that I had started using back around 2005, but for an entirely different purpose. Like I was doing improv classes in New York, and I was acting in like films and commercials and stuff. And ZipZapZop is a game that's played in improv classes, like at the beginning of class. It's commonly played game. And so I had gotten the domain name on the internet way back then, and ZipZapZop.com. I was like, oh, the .com is available. I'm going to grab that. And so for a while, I was using it for like a video blog that I was doing, but that was becoming real popular around 2005, 2006. And so I was doing like a daily kind of video blog on ZipZapZop. And then that kind of went by the wayside, again, moved to the mountains and focused on career and family and just kind of it was sitting there. And then when I was thinking about a name for the project, I was like, oh, I should just use ZipZapZop. I already have the domain. So I like to be very practical, and just like, oh, that makes sense. Let's just go with that, and very sort of spontaneous and improvisational, so that's kind of like, how I ended up with ZipZapZop. But then I had a couple of tunes that were a little bit different and they didn't quite fit in with ZipZapZop. And I was like, I had a friend who lives in my neighborhood who I'd heard was doing auctioneering on the microphone. I thought maybe he could do some vocals for me, on the microphone. And so we started chatting about that, and eventually he came over and we started recording some stuff, and thus the Pill Hill Deans were born. So that became my second project, and also a NAS project, part of the NAS community, the Pill Hill Deans. And now I've just started a third one up this last year as well, called Luther Van Gross, with a couple of old college buddies.
Busy.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's like the faucet was closed for like 10, 12, 15 years, and then it just like now it's like spraying open and just like feeling a lot of creative vibes.
Yeah. And so you have all these projects going on, but you've spoken on, you've paused at certain points for family and career. And speaking about, being kind of a practical person, if it makes sense, maybe we just do that, right? So let's talk a little bit about that career and the family and kind of what that other side of you is.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I've been married 20 years. My wife and I met when we were in Brooklyn. We have a couple of boys. One's just graduated high school now and going off to college. The other one's in high school. And, they're really interesting and different from each other. And actually my older son, who's 18, also produces with Ableton now. Like we share that sort of musical passion. And so he's started creating a lot with Ableton and has some music projects going on. And so that's been a really fantastic thing. He's teaching himself how to play the guitar as well. So I'm trying to help out there a little bit. And yeah, we live in Baltimore, and we sometimes go camping, a lot of hiking, and biking and stuff like that. And my career is in higher education. I started off teaching a long time ago, in Denver in the 90s, and got into TV teaching like right away, where I was teaching 4 schools at once over the TV. And they could talk to me with microphones, but I couldn't see them. So distance learning. And that led to me getting a master's degree in instructional technology while I was doing that kind of teaching. And on the side, I was always doing music stuff as well. So I was very busy in Denver. This is before I had any kids, right? And so I was doing all kinds of like visuals, projections, and like ambient DJing and trip hop DJing and stuff, and then starting to produce music, and then the various music projects that I had in Denver as well. And so, yeah, it just kind of like evolved out of there. But then I've always had sort of 2 lives going on simultaneously, like a musical creative life, and then sort of a more practical, like higher education kind of thing. So now I've been in higher education as an administrator basically since like 2006. So it all kind of like feeds into each other and helps each other out. Like my instructional technology helps me with learning new things about like audio as well, and on how to work with Ableton Live and things like that. And I've had a couple of other music projects along the way that were very helpful education-wise, in terms of like the drum and bass project I was with, PH10, and then I was with a minimal techno project in New York called Socks and Sandals. And so, like it's just so funny. Like I've had these 2 parallel lives kind of in a way, that they don't really intersect, but they've been pretty constant, I guess, well, constant, but not for that one period of time.
Although it seems like they're starting to intersect. If your son's becoming music orientated and you've got that sort of connection with him, it sounds like they're starting to connect with each other a little bit more than they used to, which is fantastic because you can share that with him.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's been a wonderful thing. And I think he's going to continue. He's going to a liberal arts school where they have like electronic music studio and stuff like that. So I think it'll be a really nice thing going forward.
Awesome. So you mentioned that you had some ideas and some music that didn't quite fit into Zip Zap Zop. So could you explain to us sort of what that music is, what genre? Because it says that you've sort of created your own sort of genre for Zip Zap Zop. So can you explain to us your interests, how that's impacted what music you do, and then what other music you are interested in also?
Absolutely. So the Zip Zap Zop project, I think of as primarily in the bass music dubstep realm, essentially. Although it's been through many phases and I continue to evolve and learn. And, one of my goals is to continue to make music that's closer to what I listen to. There's always been a kind of a gap there in some ways between like what I listen to and what I'm able to make and like the knowledge and experience to that they were always quite different. So I've been really trying to hone in on bringing those together a little bit more so that I'm sort of making similar music to a lot of what I'm listening to and that I really like best. Um, but there were some tracks that I was making early on that had a beat that was more like a drum and bass beat. It was faster, and with maybe some rock and like guitar and bass or something, and more vocals. I experiment with vocals off and on. Some of the Zip Zap Zop, especially the earlier stuff, had quite a bit of vocals. More recently, I've dropped the vocals quite a lot out of Zip Zap Zop, whereas the Pill Hill Deans kind of filled that gap in terms of like faster, more drum and bassy, and or either slower and more like hip hop, but with a lot of vocals. And so that's kind of really ended up being the real differentiating point there was, that um, with the Pill Hill Deans, we were focusing a little more on the faster drum and bassy kind of beats and a lot more on the vocals. My partner in that project, Dean Clean, aka Colin, does a lot of writing. He's a law professor and is actually, for one more day, he's a dean as well at the university. And then he's stepping down to go on to sabbatical. But so he's very into like writing things. So a good example, we've been talking about bass, the sound of bass, like the reverberation of sub bass, and what that's like in the history of humankind, like and evolution. So for example, like if you go way, way, way back, you could hear like, mastodons or whatever animals, like you could hear them tromping along, and that was the sound of bass, right? Or thunder, right? And then it became like drums and things like that kind of brought that in. So just we were thinking about this, and so now one of the things we're working on is a new track called The History of Bass, where he's really studied about the history of like evolution of the sound and so on, and then like written about it. And so it's like a talking kind of almost like a lecture on top of music.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is. So I guess I want to kind of pivot a little bit too. I know you had this journey with music. You've mentioned being in kind of like several different bands and projects over your career, right? Do you have any good stories that you would just want to share from any of your experiences performing?
It's funny because at this age, I've like in Denver, I played for tiny little places in front of a handful of people and then eventually built up something and then kind of moved on into something else. And even when I love to talk about going on tour in Europe in 1999, because it's the one time I went on tour. And we were supporting another group, but we went with them through 7 countries and did 23 shows in a month. And it was just an incredible experience. It was difficult. It was creative. It was like it gave a lot of just vibes of like meeting people all over the place in all these different countries. But it really was like sometimes you'd be playing in front of like 5 people in like Austria or something, and then maybe in front of like 250 people in France or what, and it was just some of those variety. And I think it's really, I don't know. It's I guess it's in a certain way, it's taught me about being sort of flexible in terms of like your expectations. And because you can literally experience everything from those two different sort of realms. I don't know what it's like to play for more than like a couple of hundred people. I don't think I've ever played for more than that. But actually, maybe in Brooklyn there was a time when we played a show or two where there were probably like maybe 300-400 people there. But like festivals, I think are kind of amazing and something that I'm curious about eventually, hoping to be able to play a festival or something like that.
Yeah, festival would be quite different, wouldn't it, for you? Be quite interesting. So, can you tell us about the song that we're going to play today? Give us a little bit of background about the writing process and.
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of collaborations, which has been fantastic, and the New Artist Spotlight has been amazing for that. Like I've collaborated with, I was trying to figure out, I didn't count, but I think it's at least 5 or 6, maybe more, New Artist Spotlight folks that I've met through Discord and through the community, and it's been a fantastic journey, meeting these folks and getting to collaborate with folks across other countries, Germany, the UK, North Carolina, Pennsylvania. So it's just been a wonderful thing. I also have been doing collaborations with people in my community in the same like electronic music dubstep realm. So one of them is Dr. Silicon, and we have a collaboration track that came out a few months back called The Chills. And we did a couple of sessions at his studio. And he's got all these really great like synthesizers and keyboards and stuff, like the real deal, like all the knobs and everything. And so at the end of one of these sessions, we were wrapping up the track and we just started jamming, and like I'm just pulling up different sounds on these synthesizers and playing and stuff. And we just started recording it. And pretty soon we were like, oh, that sounds really good. Oh, I like that. And the next thing you know, we made another track. So this is the follow-up to The Chills that's called The Willys. And I think we're going to have to do one now called The Heebie-Jeebies next, probably, to keep the theme going. So, but this is called The Willys, and it was created by Dr. Silicon and myself in a collaborative live session on keyboards and so on in his studio. And I hope you like it.
You can see the Willys.
So thank you for letting us play that here. Really good song. Your process, right? Just coming up with different sounds, right? I feel like it's very interesting because it's kind of like a totally different pathway than like the way I write music, right? Because I usually it's already production there, and I'm just coming up with a concept that I want to convey over, right? So for you, when this comes to like creating your art, right? How are you approaching it, right? From like are you just like, I want to tell this story, or I'm feeling this, or just I want to start and see what pieces come together? Like, what's your approach?
It's kind of all of the above, honestly. A lot of times I start with like a beat, and I add some bass and I add some sounds and I make a beat and make a loop and kind of start there. But there are some times where, like Crypto Orgy is a great example with the Pill Hill Deans and Her Kingdom collaboration. That started literally from the name. Like we're like, okay, we got to make a song called Crypto Orgy. I don't know what it's going to be like, but there's got to be a song called Crypto Orgy. And so that one started from the name and evolved into the writing and so on and the music. But really it happens every which way. Sometimes it's like that. Sometimes it's just a beat, or sometimes I may be out and about at some event and come home with like some sounds in my head that are reverberating and just like get inspired and want to start creating some beats and so on. But yeah, and I'll start a lot of stuff and then I've got a folder full of like 100 song starts, and a lot of them are just junk. But then I'll go back and I'll go through and I'll be like, oh, I like that one, and I'll just evolve it a little further. And then, eventually what I try to do is, let's say I've got 5 or 6 tracks that are evolved. Like right now I've got 4 that I'm working on for an EP. And I start narrowing it down to like, oh, these 4, I'm going to put them together as like an EP or an LP. And then I just try to finish those and focus on those. And that's what's been helping me to actually finish stuff because it's very easy to not finish stuff, right? It's incredibly easy to start stuff and not finish it. But what I try to do is to incrementally keep adding to it and making it a little bit better every time I open it up. And sometimes it may only be for 15 or 20 minutes at a time. And I add a little thing and then I save it and go do something else. But that's the idea, is I just do it incrementally. And then eventually I really try to hone it down to like, okay, now I'm going to finish this. And because I was trying to basically make it so I could put out like 2 tracks a month or something like that. And it's been going pretty well. Like I think I've pretty much maintained that for 2-3 years now.
It's incredible.
Oh, totally puts me to shame. So how does collaborating with other people change that process? Do you find it easier, more difficult? And, do you do it in a different order?
Each one has been a little different too. Like in some cases, Big Bald Ben sent me a message and said, "Hey, I made this song start with like lyrics and a vocal and a guitar lick." And he just sent it to me, and I was like, "Oh yeah!" And I made some stuff to go with it, and then next thing you know, we had a track. Another time, it was more like I reached out to Her Kingdom and said, "Hey, we got this song Crypto Orgy. Would love to have you do some vocals on it. Here's some ideas." And then she just recorded it on her own and sent me the audio, and then we chopped it up and put it into the song. With a couple of other collaborations that are remixes, like with About Gorillas and Vampires. Basically, we talked about doing a remix, and they offered up a couple of the songs that might be good ideas, and I latched on to Waves, which I really enjoyed, and they basically sent me the vocals and I put music to it. And that's one of the ways I really like to work, is like just get some really cool, awesome vocals from some track, and then like I build something new around it. I did that also with Caitlin Goulet for a remix for her. Terrestrial Animal, I had a really fun one where I was doing a remix for Terrestrial Animal, and I thought, well, there's that song by Emily Gray. I think the vocal would go really cool in here. And so I asked Emily if she would let me use the vocal. And so she did, and that became the Eternal, I forget the name of it now, Eternal something. It's Terrestrial Animal and Emily Gray and ZipZapZop. And it's to date one of the best things I think I ever made. And it literally, it was like one of those things where it was Christmas break. I was sitting on the sofa with my laptop and I couldn't leave. Like I just could not put it down because it just grabbed me, and it was super fun. So anyway, they kind of happen every which way, but I really love to have that freedom and the trust. Like the other artists that I've worked with have been so freeing and trusting, and that's, for me, that means a million. That's worth a million, because it just gives me a license essentially to kind of do what I want to do, and everybody's been working like that, and it's been wonderful, and then we'll give some feedback, and sometimes I may get the tempo off or something and have to make some adjustments, but yeah, it's been really just one of the best parts, I think, of being in NAS for me, like the community, the collaboration, the support. It's just been fantastic.
Yeah, and so speaking of things that grab you in NAS, right? How did you initially come across the community?
I credit Todd and Karen, Todd and Karen, or Karen and Todd, from Norway. I don't know what it was, like that. I saw their tweets, and I saw them a few times, and I followed them, and I thought, well, this looks interesting. And at the time, I was in my second year of getting started again with music, and really still didn't really know what I was doing. I was figuring a lot of stuff out, like distribution and all that kind of stuff. And just kind of struggling as an independent artist to like find my way in some ways in terms of what I was doing in the community, and then I got onto NAS, and I think there's a learning curve, like there's definitely like a whole learning curve of like not understanding what's going on, and then gradually understanding little pieces and parts, and like figuring out like how it works for you. Because one of the things I love about it is that there's so much going on that not everybody has time to do everything, right? So you do what you can fit into your schedule that works for you. And that's one of the other things I love about it is, like I can't do everything. I would love to do more, but as like family, work, etc. It's 3 projects. It's I'd rather be creating, that mostly. So, but I also love that I've met so many cool people and heard so much amazing music and made so many collaborations with some awesome folks.
So I think it might be that time of the show. What do you think, Origin?
What time would that be?
The time where we threaten our hosts,
We threaten each
make
other?
them. Sorry?
We threaten each other?
No, we threaten sorry, not our hosts, our guests. We threaten our guests.
Oh, I love that time.
Yeah.
It's the really spooky time.
Oh man.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I thought maybe I was going to bypass that.
Oh, no. Nobody gets a free pass. All you get is 15 seconds to answer 5 questions that are going to be thrown at you, and you risk losing everything that you've built, doctorates, achievements, collaborations, just completely erased from history.
That's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So
That's pressure.
you ready? Are you ready
All right,
for that
let's
pressure?
Let's do it.
Okay. I'll kick us off. Question 1. What's your favorite song on the NAS playlist right now?
And they have to be super hard, right? Because there's so many good ones. I mean, I'm going to have to go with Mr. Odzo, What You Know. It's just, what a vibe, what a jam.
Okay. Question number 2. If you could spend the day with one music artist, past or present, who would it be?
Any music artist? Doesn't have to be in NAS?
No.
Oh, past or present. Aphex Twin, I think. Yeah. Aphex Twin. That would be amazing.
Question number 3. What is your personal favorite song of all time?
Of all time? And I said this in my 10 questions as well. There's a song by Boards of Canada called Telephasic Workshop that for whatever reason, it's been my favorite for a long, long time. And I don't know if anything is ever going to replace it. It's quite old. It was on their Music Has the Right to Children album, but it's beautiful. It's amazing, like audio, just everything.
Okay, next question. In 15 seconds, tell us what success would be for you.
Right now, it looks like, I would love to be able to play out a little bit more. I'd love to be able to play maybe like a festival, and I would love to be able to do some travel that's music related. So like I travel someplace and I play something or something like that. Those would be top goals.
And question number 5, what is your personal favorite brand of shoes?
Well, that one's easy because obviously it's Clark's. They're comfortable, they're well made. I think they're even British, maybe something. But and the name you just can't be beat.
You did so well on that, actually. Yeah. I think you might be safe. We'll check with Andreas, but you might be safe.
I certainly hope so, because I don't want to lose it all.
All you gotta do, you gotta lock in, and you just gotta get those answers out. I think where people get lost is when they start trying to qualify their answers with other information, and they just kind of go on a tangent. And it's like, well, you answered the question in 3 seconds, but now we're 20 seconds later, you're still going. Great job there. I want to ask, what can we expect from you next? What's in the pipeline?
So really, the collaboration with Dr. Silicon just came out. The Luther Van Gross project is the newest one. I've got a few more tracks to release for that. That's a really fun one with my buddy in Boston and my buddy in Portland, Maine from college, and we're having a lot of fun with that. It's a very different kind of a sound. So definitely some more Luther Van Gross, some more Pill Hill Deans. We've got a couple more tracks we're finishing up before, Colin's going off on sabbatical. We'll probably go on pause for a while. But we'll have a couple tracks there for sure. And I've got an EP that is finishing up now that should be out by this fall sometime. And and I've got more cooking. I've been live streaming on Twitch as my new thing too. So hopefully some folks can check that out. I'm doing a Friday happy hour thing at 4:00 on Eastern time Fridays. So if people want to check that out, I play works in progress. I play dub plates that aren't released yet. I play new things that I buy and anything else. Would invite everyone to check that out.
I'm going to have to get a Twitch account now. No, I've never actually used that platform. Are you finding that it's good for musicians? Because I think different platforms suit different people. I personally never really got into like Instagram and don't really like TikTok. So I just sort of stuck with X and then thought I can't be bothered with any others. So how are you finding Twitch? Is it good?
I think Twitch, everyone thought of as video games because it was mostly video gaming, but it's really been taken over a lot by DJs and musicians and stuff because you can live stream from your house. And people do record release parties and stuff like that. So it's been cool. There's a really big community for it. I'd highly recommend people check it out, especially if you're DJing as well. A lot of DJs on there, and a lot of supportive community there too. ZipZapZop Dub on Twitch and on Blue Sky and Instagram, ZipZapZop Dub. And on X, it's just ZipZapZop. That's the one I got in early on. So I got ZipZapZop on there. So yeah.
And are there links to all these from your website?
Absolutely, yeah. So my main hub is ZipZapZop.com, where you can get to all the different social sites, the playlists, the music on the different platforms and so on.
Awesome.
We'll stalk you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, you'll find videos that go back to like when I was acting like 2 decades ago. There's some funny stuff on there. So enjoy.
Nice. Well, I want to thank you for coming on and spending some time with us, letting us get to know you a little better.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you both and appreciate everyone watching.
And I just want to say thank you to the community as well. But yeah, I just want to say thank you to everybody, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys again next week. Peace out.
Thank you much.
Bye.
Yeah. New Artist Spotlight Podcast.